You've got a big crowd, including your colleague Vic Snyder out there. Yeah, it's pretty good. Everybody else saw it too.
That's what happened every time he came onto the floor of the House.
All right. There'll be a lot of questions from the audience, so let's get started if it's okay with you. Or do you want to make any opening? You can certainly welcome to make any opening comments you'd like to make.
Well, first of all, let me say how happy I am to be here, how pleased I was to accept the invitation, which has been a couple of years in the works. I was telling my staff on the way here that I was here on the night that President Bill Clinton was elected President of the United States. That was such an exciting night. I was very, very honored to be here, and I think some of you were out there on the lawn with us and sliding down the side of hills and the rest of that to get to see what the history in the making, to see President Clinton take office. So thrilling. And then I was here, sometimes in between, but then I was here for the opening of the Clinton Library and the Clinton School of Public Service. And what a day that was. The skies opened up and the good luck came streaming down in buckets of rain. It was beautiful. So needless to say, it's quite an honor for me to be here. And Governor Tucker, that my former colleague, Vic Snyder, is here. I know that perhaps Marion Barry will be joining us, Cindy Ross, and God bless you for all that you will be doing. And President, we call you President, the President of the University system here in Arkansas, President Botman, thank you so much for being here as well. But to each and every one of you, I'm really delighted to see all of you. I had the privilege earlier of visiting the library, and I want to commend Stephanie Street and Terry Garner for the beautiful presentation they made. As soon as we finish here, I'm going to go back there to see more because it's so wonderful. And as I say, I've seen it before, but it's always great to see the history that President Clinton made and he continues to make, and Mrs. Secretary Clinton continues to make. And also just very thrilled to be in the state of Arkansas. So I can't wait to hear what you all have to say. And Skip, aren't we lucky that he is heading up this school with all of his academic achievements? President Bobbitt, congratulations to you for having this wonderful institution and among an array of wonderful institutions. I am sure we're really honored you're here. Thank you.
Ready?
Ready?
Let's go. Okay. You've never shied away from controversial issues. So let's start with one. In 2010, you were a driving force for the passage of the Affordable Care Act, when many thought it was never going to pass, never going to get out of Congress. You never gave up. Would you talk about the Act's impact, its politics, and where you see it going from here?
And how much time do I have to do that?
No, it can't take long because I got more.
Oh, okay. Well, let me give you the abbreviated version and then you can ask more. First of all, thank you for asking that question, because I believe that many members of Congress believe that passing the Affordable Care Act was the most monumental achievement in our own lives of public service. For us, it ranked right up there with Social Security in the 30s, Medicare in the 60s, the Affordable Care Act, health care for all Americans as a right, not a privilege, passing the Congress. There was absolutely no way, Skip, may I call you Skip?
You can.
Thank you. Skip, that we were going to let that opportunity pass. And it was a situation where it had been tried for 100 years. President Theodore Roosevelt was the first president to try to pass some kind of access to affordable health care for Americans. And over time, you know, of course, the great work that was done during the Clinton administration sort of helped set us up for what would come next, to know what to do and another path to take if that would work. And so it was controversial, and it was controversial mostly because it was made controversial by hundreds of millions of dollars being poured in to misrepresent what it was. There was a special interest commitment to the status quo that worked for the health insurance industry, but really wasn't working for individual families and people. If there were no other reason to pass an Affordable Care Act than the fact that everybody loved their insurance and their health insurance company, it would still have been absolutely essential that we do it because it was financially unsustainable as a status quo. It was unsustainable for individuals, for their families. It was unsustainable for businesses and nonprofits vis-a-vis their employees. It was unsustainable for corporate America. It was a competitive issue. They're going to compete globally, and yet other countries did not have to factor in the cost of health insurance and health care, but our businesses did. And it was unsustainable for state, local, and the federal budgets. It just was on a path of increasing cost that was unsustainable. So the goal was to increase affordability. That was the title, the Affordable Care Act. Increase accessibility, improve quality. Improve quality while lowering cost, while increasing accessibility. So this was an opportunity of a generation that we were not going to pass up. In our eyes, it was a bill about wellness and prevention. It was about the good health of America, not just health care of America. And it was about technology, and it's really, I'm very proud of it. Those who would be against it included the health insurance industry, which spent, while we were debating it, they were spending a couple $100 million during the debate on the air saying it was about death panels and abortion. It had nothing to do with any of that, but that was kind of how they tainted the debate. But again, it was something that their anti-government ideals, President Clinton, not in this reference, but in other references, has called these people anti-government ideologues. And they just did not want to see a public-private. Now, this was a bill that was market-oriented, that looked to public-private partnerships and how we go forward with it. But again, it had major opposition. So we had our ups and downs, and of course we had a massive scorched earth, take no prisoners, shock and awe, carpet bombing coming against us on the bill. That's how we saw it. And one day the press said to me, Skip, you know what, why do you think that you are going to pass this bill? How on earth are you going to get this done? And I said, well, we're going to go up to a fence that might be standing in our way, and we're going to push it open. And if the fence doesn't open, we're going to climb the fence. And if the fence is too high, we're going to pole vault in. And if that doesn't work, we're going to parachute in, but nothing is going to stand in the way for health care for all Americans as a right, not just a privilege for a few. So after it was over, he said, they said, which one did you do? So actually we pushed open the gate. We pushed open the gate. We went up there, 220 strong members of the House, to push open that gate because we all knew the urgency. And we were all committed because this was a legislation that was developed through consensus. How does this work in your area? It wasn't something we put on the table and said, let's all sign up on this. It was built through consensus about meeting the needs of the American people, that it would work, that it would be sustainable, that it would be affordable, that it would be about making America a healthier country. So everybody was committed in our ranks who would be voting for it, and we had everybody else. We had the nuns, thank God for the nuns there pushing the gate open with us. We had everybody in America who cared about this issue, who understood the need for affordable, accessible, quality health care for many more Americans. And so any of you who were helpful in that regard, I hope you take personal satisfaction in the role that you played in this, because it took everything. It took everything to push open that gate. The day after the bill passed, the morning after the president called, President Obama, he called, he said, Last night when you passed the Affordable Care Act on the floor of the House, I was happier than I was the night I was elected President of the United States. I said, well, Mr. President, I was pretty happy too, but I wasn't happier than the night you were elected President. Because if you weren't elected President of the United States, we would not be passing the Affordable Health Care bill. It took everything. It took the President of the United States, and it took all of you who played a role in urging us to do that, supplied us with intellectual resources of how one thing would work better than another, and just your overall encouragement. So we're very thrilled. One call that I was especially pleased with was from Secretary Clinton. She called me on her way someplace from the plane to say, it's done. That was really thrilling for me.
Well, you certainly deserve a lot of credit, and President, right, but there were a lot of people that thought that thing was dead in Congress, and you never let it die, so there are going to be millions of Americans who are going to have health insurance, going to have you to thank. And I
hope all of you will help us implement the bill, because people have to know what this means to them, and that's really the step that we're engaged in now. Thank you, Skip, for your kind word.
Well, now that you got that easy thing accomplished, we had Senator John McCain here a few weeks ago talking about, in a very bipartisan speech, talked about immigration reform and his desire to see it and for Congress to come together. Is it possible to do that in 2013?
Oh, I think that will happen before the year is out. Certainly it will happen in this Congress, and I'm so pleased that Senator McCain spoke to that. He has, over time, been a supporter of, and you mentioned bipartisan, the strongest proponent for comprehensive immigration reform has been President George W. Bush. Coming from Texas, he understood what needed to be done. His own party did not vote with him at that time, but he was a leading advocate, and I hope he'll help us to get it done. Now, we'll have comprehensive immigration reform. It will secure our borders, as is our sovereign responsibility as a nation. It will protect our workers. It will hopefully unify families. It will provide a path to legalization and citizenship over time to many people, and it is really a values debate. That's why it's bipartisan. We have the evangelical community helping us on this. They feel very strongly in their leadership, the Baptist Convention, Southern Baptist Convention, across the board. There's really solid support. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in Congress will vote for it. And that's the struggle that we are, to thread the needle. It's always about threading the needle to get, isn't it, Dick? To get the right balance. Now, many of my colleagues on the House Democratic side think the path is too long and this or that. I said, you know what? We've been waiting a long time. Let's start down that path. So I believe that the Senate will take it up starting in June 1. They'll start their debate, their process on it. And I would hope by the time we all leave in August that the Senate will have finished its business, and then we go to the House. But again, President Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. And the public sentiment on this issue has been very strong. If I just may be allowed what might be interpreted as a partisan moment, 70% of Hispanics voted Democratic in the last election. That was a very eloquent message to the Congress of the United States. So some people who might not have thought this was a good idea at some point saw it in a different light after that election. So that gives me hope that a word to the wise should be sufficient.
Let's shift to the international stage for just a moment. Given your experience and work with the country of Syria, what do you see, and what's going on the ground now? What do you see about America's role, and how do we strike a proper balance?
Well, now that we're going to international arena, let me say what a joy it was to meet with many of the students before we came out here. And as I said, they're from A to U, Arkansas to Uganda, and everything in between, and many interested in global health, global development, and the rest. And so our responsibilities as leaders in the world, who better exemplifies it than
President Clinton and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So great. On the subject of Syria, I've been to Syria. I visited the president of Syria when I was speaker with a delegation of very senior members, chairman of the committees on foreign affairs, armed services, all the intelligence, all the relevant committees. At that time, that was maybe about 6 years ago, and he was kind of telling us how he was moving into the future and this or that. But the fact is, he really wasn't. He was just as disrespectful of the dignity and worth of his people as his father had been before him, except now in real time, it was being tweeted all over the world. His behavior is outside the circle of civilized human behavior. He's the president of the country, kills tens of thousands of his own people. So in terms of the United States, we always say never again, and we're going to allow certain things to happen. And this is an internal conflict. And of course, you looked at Libya, a recent experience, where the whole the Arab world, NATO, everybody came together to overthrow, to topple Gaddafi. This is a little bit different because of the civil war aspect of it. But I do think that we are at a place now where the president said, if they use chemical, biological weapons, it will change the calculus as to what we do there. The evidence has to be there that they did do that for the calculus to change. But I see us as a country coming to a place where first we did some things, then we did more non-lethal aid that Secretary Kerry proposed a couple of weeks ago. Now I think we're moving to a place where we'll be providing more lethal aid and to strengthen the hand of those who would like to see President Assad gone. It's too bad, 2 years. But these are very complicated situations that we have to deal with. There is no appetite in the public mind for America to have boots on the ground any other place. You know, they want people to come home. So that was never an option for us. Air cover, no-fly zone, all of that is dangerous to our troops because, unlike Libya, Syria has a great anti-aircraft defenses. So there's a risk involved to our men and women in uniform, unlike what would be happening in a place like Libya. So no boots on the ground, careful about the air cover because that could result in U.S. deaths, and what is it that we would achieve with that? And now I'm pleased that, now I'm not making any announcement and I don't know this for a fact, but I do believe we're moving to a place where more lethal aid will be supplied to them. Now one of the things was, who are these people? Who are the opposition? And how complicated is that? And that's part of the problem too. But the fact is, we may not have an exact picture of every single one of them, but we know who President Assad is, and he's brutal in the treatment of his own people, and this just really cannot continue.
You may have read or heard about, we had a little pipeline explosion in Arkansas, and we had a small Arkansas town that people woke up and had sludge running down the streets. Thank goodness there were gutters on the streets, kind of kept it in the middle of the road. But it's brought this whole new emphasis and debate on the environment, on energy, and particularly the big decision about the Keystone Pipeline. Do you have any comments on that? What do you think? And do you think the President will approve it? Or the Secretary of State, I guess, is the one that approves it.
The President approves. I mean, the Secretary of State recommends, and then it's up to, well, that's the way I would think. It certainly would, the way it would have been when President Clinton was president, right? Here's the thing. In addressing our energy needs and our competitiveness and the green technologies and all the rest, this is a wonderful opportunity for our country. All these recent discoveries keep reducing our dependence on foreign oil, whether it's natural gas, and then there's questions about fracking and this or that. But we want to be smart about it. We want it to be, how do we reduce our dependence on foreign oil? How do we reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, which degrade the environment? What is a transition for that? How do we use all of the resources in every category in the best possible way for the planet as well as for the economy and job creation? So I'm sorry about what happened here, and I didn't know that sludge coming down the street was the path to the Keystone Pipeline, but if you've taken it there. Here's the thing I would say about that. As Vic can tell you, the whole issue of energy independence and energy security was a hallmark of my speakership. I thought it is really important. If we're going to create jobs, if we're going to be number one, if we're going to be competitive, if we're going to save our planet for future generations, we had to be smart about it. And in that regard, we had the support, again, of many in the evangelical community who believe, as I do, that this planet is God's creation and we have a moral responsibility to be good stewards of it, to preserve it. If you don't share that view, at least you probably believe that we have a responsibility to future generations to pass it on responsibly. And again, about jobs, it's about our national security not being dependent on unfriendly areas of the world. It's about the air our children breathe. It's about our moral responsibility. So this is a very big issue. How the Keystone Pipeline fits in is, I have really not taken a public position on it, except I think that we look at what they say. And when I was Speaker, I visited Canada and met with all the, well, I didn't think I was going there for that purpose, but what they planned in their hospitality, that I would meet with the Minister of Energy and all of the people who were interested in that. And that's their right to drill in whatever way that they choose. It is our right to decide whether that oil comes to America. So certain questions arise. One is it environmentally sound for it to come through our country? That's up to the Secretary of State to study the report. There was one report, now there'll be another report, and make a recommendation to the President. There's serious questions there. Let's get the facts. Secondly, and this is what I find disconcerting, and that is they keep saying we need to have the Keystone Pipeline because it's going to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. But there isn't anybody who can tell you that any of that oil is for U.S. consumption. It just goes from Canada to the refineries to Asia or points east or west, but it does not stay in the United States. And then I got up one morning and heard that there were tens of thousands of jobs that were going to be created, and that was really an exaggeration. Now, my friends who want the pipeline find what I just said objectionable, but they're only questions. They're only questions. What is the environmental impact? Why are you saying it's going to increase, decrease our dependence on foreign oil when none of it is for domestic consumption? And what is, what really is the job situation now? Right now, people are so hungry for jobs. Jobs, 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 right? It's the answer to every challenge that we have, that families be economically secure. So people are looking for jobs. But in terms of wind and renewables, wind turbines and solar, probably 20 times more jobs are created each year by going down those paths. So if you want to talk about jobs, let's talk about where the jobs really are. On the other hand, if the report comes back that it is not environmentally damaging, and the reason it's at the Secretary of State is because it's crossing our border into our country and has something to do with our relationship with our neighbor. When I was there, I asked them, why don't you have a pipeline in your own country? You got the Pacific, you got the Atlantic. Someone even suggests you have the Arctic, but that might not be a viable path. Well, go west, you got the Rocky Mountains and burial grounds, and we can't do that. If you go east, that seems like a path, but nonetheless, they want to come south. So again, let's just see, as I've said, let's see when you weigh the equities of all of this, it seems to me that if it's very damaging to our environment, that is a heavy equity to weigh. We have to see what that report is and hope that it's objective and carefully drawn. And I have a feeling that we're going to have a follow-up question from the audience on this.
Let me ask this, shifting gears a little bit, because I know you've been certainly a strong role model for young women and women seeking elective office. While there are more women voters now than men, what can be done to encourage more women to seek elective office?
Thank you for asking that question. I have a plan. I've been working it for a while. I want to work it more, and I hope you all will help. We have, since I came to Congress, when I came, say there are 435 members of Congress, which there weren't 20, maybe 24 women. Half on the Democratic side, half on the Republican side. Now we've increased our number up to 60. They've increased theirs to 20. But we made a decision to increase the number. It's all incremental. I think that we have to kick open the door for women to just a different environment. We've been working in an environment that has not been particularly friendly to the success of women in politics and public service. And I might say, whatever fields where we want the empowerment of women. So particularly on politics and elective office, I promise you this. I promise you this. I know this is true. If you reduce the role of money in politics and increase the level of civility, you will elect more women to public office. And that's exactly what we have to do. It's really important. It's urgent. Not that women are better than men. The mix is better. The mix is better. When you talked about my joining the table of leaders with the President of the United States in your introduction, I remember very well the first day I went to the White House as the elected leader of the Democrats to go to the table. And when I went, I was very casual because during the Clinton years, we had been there, whether it was in intelligence work or appropriations or whatever, the president had a great communication with Congress. So when I was going for my first meeting, I wasn't apprehensive or afraid or, nervous or anything. I thought, I'm going to a meeting at the White House. But when I opened that door and went, the door opened, whatever it was, I went in there and I saw the president, the vice president, and the other leaders, the House and Senate, Democrat and Republican. I realized that this was unlike any meeting that I'd ever been to before at the White House. In fact, it was unlike any meeting that any woman had ever been to at the White House. Because it wasn't like I was going to the cabinet table where my presence there was derived from the president. It was that my presence there was the power that my colleagues gave me to go to that table as a representative of the first branch of government, the legislative branch. And it was quite stunning. So I sat down, President Bush, most gracious, President George W. Bush, very gracious, welcomed me to my first meeting of the leadership and this or that. And as he was speaking, this never happened to me before, and I've been doing some reading, not seeking it out, but it's coming to me about what happened next. I'm sitting on the chair, the President of the United States is talking about getting started on the legislative agenda or whatever, and all of a sudden I feel really closed in on my chair. I mean, it's packed and jammed. I'm like this on my chair, like this. And I just realized that it was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lakeisha Mott, Alice Paul, Sojourner Truth, name anybody. They were all there on the chair with me. They were all there, packed and jammed. And I could hear them say, "At last, we have a seat at the table." And then they were gone. My first thought was, we want more. We want more women, we want more minorities, we want more other people at the table. But that actually never happened to me before or since, but it happened that day. And I realized what I knew, but in real time, right then and there, the shoulders that I was standing on, and that others would be standing on mine, and the responsibility we have to have more women involved. If I may, I'd just like to say a word about Hillary Clinton.
Good, because I was getting ready to ask you that question.
I pray that Hillary Clinton decides to run for president of the United States. Let's set aside for a moment the fact that she is a woman. As a person, she will be the most qualified person to enter the White House in modern history. She participated in the history as the First Lady, an active First Lady, saw firsthand the challenges, the urgency, the weight of the world on the shoulder of the President. As a senator, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, all of her work there representing in her own right the people of her state. And as Secretary of State, just with such dignity and making us all so proud, representing our country, our values, our strength throughout the world in a way that I don't know that anybody can do, because nobody has been First Lady and Senator and now Secretary of State. So putting everything aside that she's a woman, she'd be the best qualified person we had seen. With all due respect to President Clinton when he went in, President Obama and President Bush and everybody else. Now, that she happens to be a woman, that is a spectacular thing. That is a spectacular thing. But it is in no way she should be because she's a woman and she's qualified enough. No, she's the best qualified, and she happens to be a woman. And her choosing to run, now I have no knowledge of anything except my prayers. And maybe you'll find out tomorrow at the airport. But I don't think so. Anyway, that she happens to be a woman. And I say this because I traveled the whole country yesterday. I was in Dallas, Texas, and I was at the Irma Rangel Young Women's Leadership School, where they're just all-girls school, and these girls were telling me they're going to be president of the United States and they're going to do this, and the confidence, the rest of it. Think of the lift that that gives to our country, yes, the women and girls in our country, to see President Hillary Clinton. Think of the message it sends to women in the world. The most powerful figure in the world is a woman, and she also happens to be the best qualified for the job. It's just a psychological thing that will happen in the minds. When I became speaker, and no, when I even went leader and all, what was interesting to me, I heard from, it was just, if you can be speaker. Now, mind you, it's harder to become speaker than to be president. Because, is this not right, Vic? You have a narrow universe of people who are making that vote. The couple hundred members of Congress. There's no other place to go. And the American people are so far ahead of Congress in so many respects. Including the role of women, as being ready for a woman. So I'm not talking about glass ceiling. We're talking about marble ceiling. This was a big deal. So I was fairly, it was interesting to me that a woman could be a speaker before we had a woman president, because I never, understanding what Congress is and how male-dominated it has been, I was pleased to have the support of Vic Snyder and Mike Ross and Marion Barry in my quest for leadership. So thank you, Arkansas. But here's the thing. When fathers of daughters were sending me all these notes on stationery that says the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams, Eleanor Roosevelt. Fathers of daughters sending me that, saying, I know now my daughter can do anything because you became speaker. Now, fathers of daughters, moms you expect, right? Moms know. But now dads know that their daughters can do anything. And so, but the path has to be cleared. So this is going to have the most, well, if it happens, and I'm certain it won't. Why wouldn't it? You tell me, Skip, why wouldn't it?
Hey, I run a nonpartisan school, but
we have an expression, those who know don't speak, and those who speak don't know. I don't know, but I'm just hoping. because it will be such a lift for our country, and first and foremost, to be the strongest and the best. So I think that would have to, but that's one thing. And that's about one person and the impact it would have on other people. But one person at a time. I wrote a book on this called Know Your Power to the Women. Have confidence in who you are. Don't let anybody tell you that staying home for some years to take care of your child doesn't count. No, it counts a lot. That when you decide to, as I did, go from the kitchen to the Congress, and that counts for something. And that whatever it is, if you believe in something and you have a vision about whatever issue or direction for our country, and you have knowledge on that issue and can exercise judgment, and people see that, you have a strategic plan on how to get the job done, when you tell people about that, you will attract so much support. So understand how necessary it is and urgent for us to have many more women, and understand how necessary and urgent it is for us to reduce the role of money, and I have a plan for that too if you ask me. Reduce the role of money in politics, increase the level of civility. Women do much better in that arena when we're having a competition of ideas and not just a let me paint you with the worst brush I can paint you with. Because women say to me all the time, how on earth do you survive all the things they say about you? I said, I really don't care. If I were not effective, they wouldn't be coming at me. They're not coming at me because, I have 9 grandchildren. Adorable and all of that. But I have 5 children, all of that. And that's not, they're coming after me because we passed the Affordable Care Act. We passed the Wall Street Reform Act. They don't like that. So what do they have to do is demonize. And so women say to me, look, I have options. Why should I put my family through that when I could be doing this, that, or the other thing? I said, because we want people in government and public service who have options. We don't want people who don't have options. We want people who have options. So we have to clear the way to make it a more hospitable environment for women, minorities, and young people to say, I'm going to go take that risk. Because the beauty is in the mix at the table when you're debating ideas. So that's my view.
And now let's take some questions from the audience. If you'd please raise your hand. Got a Clinton School student up here, Bob. John.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm a first-year student at the Clinton School. My name's John Delury. Many of us students have carved out a niche within public service. I'm focusing on climate change, but we have people doing women's rights and education and public health. But I fear that many of us are about to run into the obstacle of campaign finance, which is pervasive and which affects a lot of these different issues. And I fear that we're losing the republic. So I ask you to elaborate a little bit on your plan and hopefully provide some actionable steps that public servants and advocates could take to try to remove campaign finance and take the money out of politics.
Thank you, John. Jonathan or John? John Delury. Last week I was in London. Over the weekend, Friday I spoke at the London School of Economics, Monday at Oxford. I mentioned that because this gathering fits comfortably in that trio. Every question was about how are you going to stop the influence of money. Every question in both schools. It was very interesting to me because it's a bigger picture than what you're talking about here. Remember, Benjamin Franklin said when he came out, he said, "What form of government did we choose?" He said, "A republic, if we can keep it, if it can survive." And I am very concerned about this, our country surviving as our founders intended. They sacrificed their lives, their liberty, and their sacred honor to declare independence, to fight a war, to form a government, a democracy, government of the many, not the government of the money. And what has happened now, And with the Supreme Court decision and the rest, it's gotten worse. But it's been bad, but it has just, to the nth degree, just gotten almost impossible to sustain the American dream, the strength of the middle class, with the role that special interests play in the debate, as I told you about earlier, on any issue, as well as being a barrier to people entering politics. So I've issued a DARE. That's an acronym. D, disclose who are these people with this money. And we want to see it right there in real time on the ad. Right there, disclose. That is being fought, not going into politics here, being fought by some people very heavily. Amend, D-A, amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United. We must do that. Reform. We're about to announce our bill in the Congress to reform the political contributing system to empower small donors. And that means you have to get rid of some of the big contributions. Empower small donors. And E, empower. Because this money, this endless, undisclosed special interest money, suffocates the airways, either during a campaign or during a discussion of a bill. It suffocates the airways. And at a time of campaigns, it also is used to suppress the vote. Suppress the vote. Entities that go out there to suppress the vote. So you put obstacles of participation up for people to vote. You squeeze the air out of the airwaves. And you have quite a different turnout of people. Another way they suppress the vote, and this is really important to remember, they go really negative. Now, suppose you're watching a debate and somebody says, well, you're just not, you're a liar. They use a word like that. You would think, why would somebody talk that way? We weren't raised to talk that way. Well, they talk that way because the reaction of the public is, never mind. Never mind. I'm not paying attention to this. A pox on both your houses, right? So negativism is a vote suppressant. And when they use it, you know they're weak because they have to resort to that negativism so that people get turned off to the whole political system. And so you have to change that role of money. They are the same people, if I may, Skip, they are the same people who are using all that money to fight about paying their fair share of taxes, who fight the increase in the minimum wage, who want budget cuts that cut education and anything that lifts people up, and they, well, it undermines the middle class, because where is your hope? You know, where is your hope? I always say hope is sitting right there between faith and love. You have faith, that you have hope because you believe that somebody will have charity about what our community is about. But when you do this, when you do what you do to wages and to education, you create a disparity in income and a disparity in education, which is related to the disparity in income, which undermines the middle class, which is the backbone of our democracy. You've got to extract that money from there. But you also have to be willing to take the slings and arrows when people go after those who would tolerate compensation in our country. 30 years ago, say in the 70s, maybe more than 30, the disparity in income between the average CEO and the average worker, as reported by the Federal Reserve, was 40 times. The CEO, average CEO, made 40 times more than the average worker. And over time, that all went up in tandem, or not even in tandem, in threesome, because the three would be productivity. So it all go up together. Somewhere along the way, something changed, and I'll tell you what I think it is. But then all of a sudden, it went like this, like a right angle. Productivity kept going up that way, but there was no reward for the worker, and all the upside went to the CEO. So that is not in furtherance of strengthening the middle class, especially if these same people don't want to raise the minimum wage, support education, and the like. It's just not the American dream. Now, a captain of industry in the 70s, his name was Abrams, Chairman Abrams of Standard Oil of New Jersey. He said this. He talked about a capitalism that was called stakeholders capitalism. The shareholders, the workers, the customers, the public at large. That's how we have capitalism that respects those equities. Since then, when you see this thing, since then it's become shareholder capitalism. So it's all about the shareholder. It's not about the employee, it's not about the customers, and it's not about the public at large. So the decisions that are made about short-term gain and reward to the CEO are not necessarily a healthy thing for even that business, much less our economy. And people who've written about this, Tom Peters talking about excellence, and the rest of the companies are the best, are those who respect their workers and keep them on even in time of recession, because at the end of the recession they will have a trained, loyal workforce. So this whole idea of valuing work, understanding that a job is an answer to almost every challenge that a family will have in terms of dignity, in terms of sustenance, of sustainability for a family. This is the challenge that we have, and the role of money in all of this has a definite impact. Now, just make one more point. Since I was at London School and at Oxford, Arnold Toynbee went to Oxford. I think he taught there a little bit, but he definitely taught at London School. So I was talking about him when I was there. And in his Histories of Civilization, since we're at a university, in his Histories of Civilization and the story and all that, he talks about civilizations or countries or societies, whatever term you want to use. At their start, they're usually optimistic, and he talks about the minority, the creative minority. He didn't mean minority like some people, more people, or fewer people than others. He meant the few who would be the governing and the leadership of a society. He talked about creative minority, which was there for the flowering of the civilization, which means that the government and the leadership were there for the people. For the people. Those societies, countries, civilizations, whatever, that then changed to the few, he called the dominant minorities, changed because they thought it was really about using power for money for the few and not for the many. And that's when societies started to degrade. Only those societies, he goes on to say, that meet the challenge that this creates a schism in the soul of a society, he says. A schism because of just the lack of concern about people and the endless appetite to be acquisitive in terms of money and power that goes with it at the expense and exploitation of workers. Only societies that address the challenge are the ones that survive. So whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, and I tell my Republican friends, take back your party, this is not the grand old party. Whether just as Americans, not just as Americans, proudly as Americans, we really have to address this challenge of income and education disparity that is undermining the American dream, undermining the middle class and those who aspire to it, and that is the backbone of a democracy. And this money is the most corrosive, is a very corrosive part of all of that. But it's also about the spirit of our country, who we are. We are a democracy. We respect the middle class and those who aspire to it. We believe that reigniting the American dream is our our North Star, reigniting the American dream, building ladders of opportunity. People want to work hard, play by the rules, take responsibility so that everybody has a chance to succeed. But that's not the situation we're in right now. It's the situation we insist that we be in quite soon. And you know, America is anything but the most optimistic country in the world. So I know that our society will make the right decisions. But everybody has to play a part in it, and breaking down cynicism that people have because, oh, well, who's going to listen to me because I'm not Mr. Big Bucks. That's what we have to do. It's only a decision, and it's a decision that we have to make to meet that challenge. So thank you for your question.
Good question. Yes, right beside you, Bob.
Thank you so much for coming. There are a lot of models internationally for how to increase women's representation in the legislature. I'm wondering if you would, I mean, there are examples like reserved seats and also just voluntary party goals. I'm wondering if you would ever consider encouraging the Democratic Party to voluntarily adopt a goal of female candidates, or if there are any other models internationally you've admired.
Well, some of the models we have insisted upon in other countries, like Afghanistan, that they have X number, this or that. I think that in some ways, while I love what you're proposing, it would be hard to do here. You know, if you're starting out, you have an easier time to establish that. We want more women, we want minorities, we want LGBT. And by the way, if I may, the House Democratic Caucus, we're 201 members, 218 is a majority, 201 members, 54% of our caucus is women, minorities, and LGBT community members. It's quite wonderful. And 50% of our would-be chairmen, what we call the ranking members, are women and minorities. So we're very excited about that as well. But it's something that we should discuss. I don't know what the prospect for it would be, because, as I say, we have a lot of diversity that we want to put in there. But I really do believe that if we can get rid of the money thing, and we can be respectful to women when they speak and not challenge them in a way that they have to respond harshly, and that's the end of that, right, in a debate, that there's a path to go beyond parity, beyond, you know, redress past grievances. Let's go beyond parity. But certainly, regionally, it might be valuable for the party. It might be successful for the party to make those. I'm all for it. I'm just saying I just don't know what the prospect of success is. Let's just go out there and win, baby. Let's just go win. Let's go win.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the Honorable Nancy Pelosi.
So just in closing, I say to women, know your power. We really need you to be involved. Let's pursue every avenue and see what we can achieve. Many of us worked for years to have 50% of the delegates to the Democratic Convention to be women, and hopefully we can go beyond that. But really, thank you all very much. What an honor it is to be here at a place named for President Clinton, a great leader in our country as president, and certainly beyond. And from what we can tell about the family, the president, the secretary, Chelsea, we ain't seen nothing yet. So thank you all very much. Thank you.